welcome to this session, which is the business case for recycled fibre content. My name's Janine, so I'm from Deloitte, the delivery collaborator for the session today. So I'm just here at the moment to introduce you to your speakers and your moderator, and then I'll help coordinate the room to break out into discussion forums. So today's session is, as I've said before, the business case for recycled fibre content. So the session is going to delve into the compelling business case for incorporating recycled fibre through product ranges, and looking very much at the economic, environmental, social and consumer drivers and barriers in terms of adopting recycled fibre content. So today we have Annabelle Georgina Hunter from Santis Textiles, Catherine Loader from John Lewis, and we've got Philippa Grogan, Nobody's Child, Sue Fairley, and Helen Kirkum. Great. And our moderator today is Adam Mansell, who you may have seen this morning. So with that, I will hand over to the panel.
Thank you very much. I was going to ask the panel to introduce themselves, but it's just been done. So it means we get more time because we've got a fantastic topic to look at and an amazing panel to discuss it, and then you need to do the work afterwards. So this isn't just about listening, this is about taking part. I mentioned this very briefly this morning, but there are so many issues around sustainability, but I think that this topic is absolutely fundamental if we're going to see a real global change in our industry. We can give it a nice description, but what we're really talking about now is money. It's about economics. It's about how we make the economics of fibre-to-fibre recycling work and how we make it a commercial reality. Now, there is a problem statement that the Deloitte team will put up at the end of the panel session that's going to be asking you for your views on this, but that's kind of really what we are talking about today. So I'm just going to jump in and start to ask the panel their views on this whole area of recycled materials and how they're going to incorporate it into their products. So if I can turn to you first, and a sort of more broad question to begin with. New Look is a volume player, but you've shown really strong commitment to sustainability, to looking at the ways in which you can change the fibre content, the recycled content in your products, and you've got really heavily involved in projects like SIFIN and the ACT recycling programme. Why has an organisation like New Look got involved in these projects?
Well, the main answer to that is that we have a plan, a sustainability strategy, and I would advise anyone to have a roadmap, basically, as to how they're going to understand the impact of how they're doing business and be able to affect and lower the impact of that business. And the raw material strategies are really key to that, and part of that is obviously drawing recycled materials into the portfolio of fibres that we use, but also then how do we create a circular economy. And I don't believe that's going to happen overnight, but it's something that I believe you have to set your stall out and decide what that plan is going to look like, and then we've got to decide, okay, well, what are the things we've got to do? So if I think about our fibre mix, when we started this 3-4 years ago, 2% of our materials were what I would describe as lower impact, not just me, but how the business would describe lower impact. We're now up to about 72% of that mix. Within our recycled strategy, we've still got a long way to go, but with the support of our senior management team, we've made some commitments, and we had a commitment about cotton. We're raising the bar on all of these. That's going to include increasing the recycled content in our, I think 2% of our jeans currently have recycled content. Clearly that's got to go up quite significantly. Together with that, we've also then got our recycled synthetics. So our recycled synthetics, we've set ourselves a target by the end of this year that 50% of the synthetics that we're putting on the market will have more than 25% recycled content in them. It's a start. Again, we know that bar has to rise, and of course there's a huge challenge with actually looking at where that recycled material is coming from, which brings me round to the circularity piece, because a lot of it is coming from plastic bottles at the moment, and then looking at the feedstock and how we actually increase the right recycled content to create that market. Hence the involvement in the circularity projects, because it's identifying that actually we need to get involved in all areas of that to be able to draw and use and create the recycled materials.
Are you finding there are any economic blockers along this journey? I mean, we all hear stories about what happened to Renew, Sell and all the rest of it. And one of the things we always hear is that recycled content is 20% more expensive than virgin. I'm not saying that is true. That is what, those are the sorts of figures that are thrown around.
Well,
is that proving a problem?
Well, so the answer up until now is obviously we need innovative new recycled materials to come through. And yes, the Renew Cell thing, I think we've got to look at as what lessons do we learn from that? The availability of the material, the scalability of the material, the cost of that material, and obviously my colleague here is going to talk about that. But for me, the way we set our stall out initially was to set some targets for our buying teams, and initially, the prices of recycled materials were significantly more expensive. That differential has reduced. It will probably go up again because obviously we're going to change the nature of the recycled materials that are coming through. And obviously the current environment. So the one thing that we managed to achieve within the business was not go backwards. So as we were moving forward, it was a case of, okay, we've come into the current trading climate. The landscape has changed a little bit. What do? Well, we committed not to go backwards. So we probably stalled a little bit and now we're back off and running again. So yes, there's many, many challenges still to come, but being part of the solution as well as the challenge is where we need to be.
Thank you, Sue. Catherine, from a John Lewis Partners, circular design principles are very important, but there's a constant debate about longevity, durability, and recycling. How do you manage all those expectations at once, and which one's more important than another?
Thanks for having me today. So for anyone that doesn't know, I'll just speak to a little bit more about our circular design program. So a couple of years we started working with the University of Exeter to establish our circular design principles, and they loosely follow the same circular design principles that have been set out by the likes of the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. So we look at things like increasing recycled content in our products, which we're obviously talking about today. We also look at durability, longevity. How do we make sure our products are as good quality as possible? And then we also look at end of life and recyclability. So how do we design products that can be reused as much as possible, and when they can no longer be reused, how can we recycle them? And that is a key issue that we're coming up against is obviously there is a bit of a trade-off between increasing recycled content and durability. Obviously, when you're looking at the waste hierarchy, you want to prioritize reuse as much as possible. So for us at John Lewis, we really prioritize that durability aspect. So we're involved in a few different projects around that. So we're part of the WRAP LITAC project, looking at how we can increase durability of our clothing and how can we improve our product standards. But obviously, it is a balance. We want to make sure that we're driving increased recycled content. We've got a number of materials targets similar to New Look. But kind of finding the trade-off between those two is definitely a real challenge.
I mean, you focused on the need to keep things in use for as long as possible. When it gets to a point when it can't be reused and it does go into recycling, how do you think retailers can collaborate with the existing recycling technologies and the new technologies that are coming on stream?
Yeah, so we currently have a fashion take-back scheme. So we work with the service provider Satcol, who are a brilliant partner to work with, and they basically take all of our customer take-back product and identify different quality streams. So if a product is suitable for reuse or resale, that goes straight into their kind of grade A product line. But anything that's not suitable or has damaged or is ripped or just can't be reused or resold, then goes down into a fibre-to-fibre recycling pathway. Satco are a really great provider to work with because they're also doing a lot of work in the kind of innovation space. So I think they've just recently launched their polyester recycling plant in the UK as well, which is really exciting. And I think we've heard it quite a few times today, but collaboration is really key. We know that we can't solve these issues by ourselves. We really have to work with others. So I think it's about identifying the right partners. Obviously, there needs to be increased regulation in this space, and we've I've heard a lot about legislation today, but that will also really help to kind of create those new innovations and really push the needle forward.
Annabelle, can I turn to you as someone who actually does fibre-to-fibre textile recycling? Can you tell us about your experience of building a textile-to-textile recycling technology?
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, first of all, it wasn't me. It was my father. So I have to give him the credit where it's due. And I just wanted to make note that everything I'm wearing as well today is 100% recycled. So and Toby just asked me today if our technology is actually scaled, and it has been since 2019. So we have been developing 100% recycled cotton, knits, wovens, and denim since 2019. And the story behind that is a very long and elaborate story, and I can definitely entertain everyone with that, but I won't do it today. But my father, who is a machine engineer by background, built a recycling machine, which is the only one in the world which is basically focusing on maintaining a long, stable, recycled fiber length, and it's focusing on textile-to-textile recycling. So there's downcycling machines, but they're different to our machine, and he developed it so that we could get clothing and textiles out of it. And his background was basically in spinning machines, so he was building spinning machines, and my grandfather was also building spinning machines and building the technical systems for weaving machines at Saurer, and then my dad was at Reacher. And so we have this machine legacy, and I think in the beginning I joined and I was like, ooh, so exciting, you know, fashion and everything, and I realized the machine technology behind it and the spinning knowledge that my dad has, and everything he took from his knowledge from the machinery industry and the real textile industry has gone into this recycling machine that he's built today. And my experience around it, I've been working with my father for 4.5 years now, and we're still very small. We don't have any kind of investment, and all the profits that we make go back into developing and evolving this machine, so that we now have a second version, which is now being licensed to other machine makers to build as well. We have our own supply chain, and what I've really done in the last few years is try to communicate with brands and designers as much as I can, to really educate them and show them what a mechanical recycling machine looks like, and what the difference between a downcycling machine and a textile-to-textile recycling machine like ours looks like, and how the process works, and just trying to make it cool and fun and accessible, you know, because I think the machine side of the textile industry is very unknown, and it's kind of, you know, it's driven by engineers. So of course someone needs to be in the middle kind of translating it, and the brands that I've worked with in the last 4 years, it's a bit of like we hold each other's hands, but it's turned into all these like friendships, and it's a slow development, but it's now at a really nice point, and there's a lot of support, so that's very holistic.
Can you talk to us a little bit about the inputs that you need? So can you do with post-consumer? Does it have to be post-industrial? Those sorts of challenges.
So post-consumer, so this denim jacket, for example, is 50% post, 50% pre-consumer. And basically, the reason we got the post-consumer for this was through a take-back scheme with PVH. So this is a Tommy Jeans denim jacket that was released in 2019. And the post-consumer can only, like, you know, Catherine was saying about legislation, it can only happen when there's legislation in place. So as much as we'd love to take post-consumer and make more products like this out of it, we need brand and legislation support to help us to create those schemes. Because for this, my dad did a lot of lobbying with customs, and you know, it was a lot of work to try and get post-consumer in. So we get a lot of questions about post-consumer, and everyone's running ahead, and they want to be recycling post-consumer. And I'm like, but we haven't even solved how to get the post-consumer there. So how do you expect us as you know, we're building machines, we're making recycling already with the fabrics. It's really impossible to think that we can actually take all the clothing back now. We have no systems for it. So that's one thing. So what my dad wanted to do, we don't have our own factory. It's a plug and play model where he builds the machine, he focuses on that, and then he puts it into existing supply chains. That way they can also generate their own waste from weaving and spinning, and then they can recycle that, because that's also a big stream that nobody really talks about. because it's kind of cool to talk about the old clothes. So, yeah, that's, yeah.
You've mentioned that you work with brands and retailers. What would your top 3 recommendations be to the brands and retailers in the room when it comes to approaching fibre-to-fibre recycling?
Well, I'm going to take what Mr. Brunello said.
Just make it short.
In English, yeah, I don't know where she is, but I'm not going to quote Kant to all of you. But I honestly, my takeaway was this whole familiarity and like respecting one another and being friends with one another. I know that sounds really naive, but for 4.5 years, I didn't have a massive marketing budget. That's why nobody really knows us. But I've been going out to all my brands and just having these dialogues and exchanges, which I think is really vital to create, you know, movement in the industry. But I also think there are some brands, I work with some very high-end brands who actually recently, I won't name them, but they're here. But recently, they selected a fabric and they didn't even realize that it was recycled. They just loved it out of the selection. And that kind of system of giving a designer fabrics to select from without having them come up with all these crazy developments, with all these, you know, it's kind of working another way now where we should go back to the times where, you know, the fabric merchant comes with the fabrics and then you make a selection and then you put that into production. I think it's kind of working that way in the higher end sector now. And that's really, I think, something that we should all consider for the future. That we should maybe like simplify the system and simplify how we select fabrics and our understanding around it. Talk to the people who are supplying. It's also another panel that Brooke was hosting today. We were talking about creating a trustful relationship. Go out and ask to see people's factories and the processes. Don't be afraid to do it because the right people will take you there and then you will have a more fruitful journey in your textile selection.
Just a reflection on what you said earlier about the weaving industry and the spinning industry and the technology advancements there around, it could be termed sustainability, but it's actually about productivity. You know, most textile manufacturers now, even the ones in the UK, you know, I can take you to a textile manufacturer up in Lancashire who have got an AI system to manage their productivity, to manage their production runs, all of that sort of stuff. There are, you know, the amount of automation that goes on in the textile industry as opposed to the fashion industry is astonishing. But yeah, so to your point about the unseen bit, the less sexy bit of the industry, but there's lots of developments there. Philippa, if I can turn to you, can you tell us a bit about the consumer donation program that you're running with Refashion, and particularly, could you share some of the sort of key consumer insights that you've gathered from that initiative?
Yes, absolutely. Oh, there we go. With pleasure. So, first of all, sorry guys, I'm box fresh at Nobody's Child. Tomorrow's my month anniversary, so I've got some notes to scaffold me. But we've got a range of circularity and useful life extension services, actually, like a smorgasbord that we sort of pick from depending on what sort of outcome we want. So we've got the Refashion one, which is sort of all about streamlining and simplifying the sort of useful life extension processes, like resale, so people can direct to their door, sort of just when they're clearing out their wardrobes, just send them off, and it sort of removes that step, that clunkiness sometimes, and it makes it really easy for them to just sort of do it like how Netflix used to be, I suppose, before it was digital streaming. And that's going down really well. We also have redistribution, where we sort of give donations to a company called SmartWorks, where they sort of like match make people looking for jobs with work appropriate and sort of interview appropriate outfits, which is really cool. So yeah, they're all scaffolded by the Re's. We've got resale, redistribution, repair with Sojo, which is very cool. And obviously Josephine was on stage earlier, waxing lyrical about all the benefits of repair and tailoring. And then what else? Yeah, we also have some rental, which is cool, which I really like. And all of these services are sort of, the sort of raison d'etre of these are to keep clothes in use and out of waste streams, and just so that you can squeeze everything out of them before they have to be recycled. And yeah, so it's, I suppose, why I chose to answer your question in a way that was talking to all 4 points of those is just to sort of indicate that there is no silver bullet solution. It does need to all sort of be working in harmony in a suite of services, and it's going down really well with our customers. backed by popular demand. We get a lot of them in our stores now as well as online. And yeah, it's going really well, and I want to sort of dial it up massively as the months of my employment with Nobody's Child continue.
In 2023, and I am reading here, 73% of the polyester used in your range was recycled, up from 55% in 2022. And you've partnered with recycled solutions such as Reprieve and Econile, which is great. However, all of those solutions rely on feedstocks from other industries. Have you got any ambitions to incorporate textile recycled material?
In short, hell yeah. Obviously, I'm sure everyone in this room does who works in fashion. I think that as an industry, the ambition and the sort of appetite is all the way up here, but the actual realities at the moment are down here. And that's not to say that they aren't going to get there. And obviously, this is linked to Nobody's Child as well, but we're not alone in this. Textile recycling, whilst there are no silver bullets, it's like a golden ticket, isn't it? Oh, cringe. But that is the way to really start reducing the impact of our industry so that we don't have to rely on bottles. We could even eventually capture carbon from the air. Who saw that Textile Exchange Future of Synthetics report? That was amazing. But again, a lot of the solutions, they're so cool, but they do need funding, and they do need to sort of muscle in on some market share from the business as usual. Like there's one from Carbon, I won't name their name, but I was obsessed with them. It felt like I was on a first date when I was speaking to the person on a Zoom call, and I was like, can I get some samples? And they were like, yeah, in about 4 years. And I was like, oh, well, really? And so it is, there's obviously with things like EPR, the eco-modulation will get some coin for these solutions and get them sort of accelerating. Eco-design will sort of stipulate recycled content. So it's all coming together politically. And then that will leverage the funding. But there's also things, I think, beyond that government can be doing, like deepening the infrastructure, which is needed. But that's physical infrastructure. I just had a thought, which I scribbled down while you were talking, Annabelle. What about digital infrastructure, where imagine a room like this, but in the metaverse space, where we can all be connected to what we need our recycling solutions to be, and they could be like matchmaking. So you could be like, oh right, you need depolymerization and repolymerization. You need a man-made cellulosic fiber made from cotton waste. Blah 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 blah, and you can just cut out the middle person and get it all, make it really proper and streamlined, an ecosystem.
Excellent. This time next year.
Yeah.
Okay.
Give me time, babe.
Yeah. Helen, if I can turn to you, can you tell us in the audience a little bit about your brand and your products, and then within that story, perhaps focus on some of the key challenges that SMEs encounter when looking at using recycled content?
Yeah, definitely. So I'm Helen Kirkum. I have a footwear brand, Helen Kirkum Studio, which I've been running since 2019 now, so around 5 years. And I think for me as a SME, it's really, it really started off all about the idea of single sneakers, end-of-life products, and how we can utilize those products. So essentially, in a nutshell, our brand takes old shoes and makes new ones. So we work with some amazing recycling partners such as Trade, where we actually collect all the end-of-life sneakers that they can't resell or reuse within their infrastructure as it stands. So I think what's really interesting about this panel and what we've been chatting about a lot is obviously fibre-to-fibre recycling, and how maybe clothes at the end of their life would immediately be recycled down into the fibre content. But for us and for me, what I particularly found interesting about shoes is they carry so much memory in them. They kind of have, similar to denim actually, it has like a warmth to it. You feel connected to like your denim jacket or your shoes, especially leather shoes. So for me, I found it super interesting to see how we could actually preserve that material as it stands before we get to the fibre-to-fibre process. So for us, what we try and do is take that material literally exactly as it is, deconstruct it back into its component pieces, so literally taking an old shoe, deconstructing it into pieces, cleaning it, collaging it essentially back together, and then creating a new material that we can create a new product with. And I think that process feels like it adds 1, 2, 3, maybe even 4 life cycles of that leather and that suede or material, whichever material we use, exactly as the properties already are before you get to the fibre-to-fibre content recycling. So for me, it feels a really interesting and untouched space. Specifically within the sneaker market, sneakers are notoriously really difficult to recycle. And I think when I first visited trade and I saw, I kind of went there at the beginning like, oh, maybe they'll give me some old shoes. And then I thought they'd give me like, I don't know, an IKEA bag of shoes. And I got there and there was a pile of bags, floor to ceiling, of single shoes specifically that they can't do anything with. So they end up with single shoes, maybe because when you donate your shoes, even with the best intention, if you don't tie the laces together or secure them as a pair, they can end up odd within the sorting process. So a lot of the recycling centres don't have the time or the capacity to be able to be like, oh, I saw that Air Force One size 5 left 5 minutes ago, let me just quickly put them back together in a pair. So then they end up odd. So essentially I saw this as like a really interesting raw material that nobody was really tapping into, and I used that to build my business model. Then I think, as you said, to quote on the kind of challenges point of view, I think because of this, it makes our products incredibly expensive. It's one of the most obvious problems, I would say, because if you think about how you would build a normal sneaker or shoe, you get your leather, your material, and then you send it to the factory. We're having to source the material, collect the material, sort the material, clean the material, deconstruct the material, rebuild the material, and then create the shoe. So it's so labor intensive what we're doing. And I think something that I've realized on the journey as well is I kind of started off as a fashion designer, let's say, and then now it's much more material development, manufacturing essentially that we're sort of delving into now. So it's I think the price point definitely becomes a challenge, and then I think also the understanding from the fashion market as a whole. I think when you're a small brand trying to sell your products, especially if you're trying to fit into the wholesale market, of course that adds another cost on top, but also the support from the fashion industry as a whole to kind of see your vision and your product more as is worthy of being on the shelves, not just as a sustainability piece or we've fulfilled our sustainability quota so we don't need your products, and rather that the future of luxury specifically is moving in this direction, I guess. 2
parts to the next question. Is your model scalable? And the second one is, should it be?
It's a good question, because I think if you'd asked me maybe 3 years ago, I would have a different answer. When I first joined, so I was supported by the British Fashion Council New Gen programme for the last 3 years. And when I first joined New Gen, we were making bespoke sneakers for individual clients, and I was really like, I'm never going to scale. There's no point. It's all about using the single shoes exactly as they are and remaking them on a really small scale. But I think as I've grown in confidence in the business, I've understood that keeping myself and this business small is not serving the greater good, let's say, of the sustainability movement or the kind of moving the zeitgeist in any way. So over the last 3 years, we've really focused on scaling, and I think our scale and the global scale is 2 very different things. But for us, as a first step, we have got from creating bespoke sneakers to creating a wholesale model where we can create material in batches that we can then send to our factory and create sneakers that, although they all have the same look and feel, that each individual shoe will be obviously made from single shoes, so they have a kind of uniqueness about them. So we are scaling, and there's also some other really interesting ways we can scale through material development as well. So it's not a no, it's just a slow.
Good answer. Good answer. I'm just going to ask each of the panelists a final question, which they don't know is coming, so my apologies, panelists. You can't answer legislation to this question, okay? I'd like each of you to reflect on what your business and us as individuals can do to drive uptake of recycled content.
I think a lot of it comes down to customer behaviour. I think one of the challenges that we've got at John Lewis is around communication. So we obviously want to drive the uptake of recycled content, but we also need to make sure that we're not at risk of greenwashing. So, and I think also in a lot of cases when you say the word circularity to customers, they still don't really know what it means. So I think for us, one of the things that we're trying to really get across is explaining to customers that circularity is more than recycling, because a lot of them just equate circularity to recycling, or they equate it to like more sustainable raw materials. So actually, I think making that connection between circularity, longevity, durability, but also that connection to recycled content as well, I think is really important. And just giving customers more information about where their products come from and how they're made. You know, we heard that in one of the keynotes this morning, but I think there are tools that we can use to encourage that. So again, one of the things that we're looking at is digital product passports and how we can use those as a tool to kind of communicate to customers. So last year we put QR codes onto something like 200,000 units of cashmere and use that as a way to really educate our customers about where their cashmere comes from, all of the processes that go into that. And I think that gives customers a bit more understanding of when it does come to price, why one product might be slightly more expensive than another if it has got an increased recycled content. So I think there's tools that we can use, but definitely that customer behaviour piece is going to be key.
Thank you. Philippa.
Was the question one thing that's not legislation?
Yeah.
Okay. I was going to say digital product passports, which we have as well, but I think that it would actually be really nice if we all slowed down a little bit to actually give these innovations room to scale so that they aren't overwhelmed with the influx of materials. It'd be nice to sort of, yeah, right? It'd be really nice to, if people sort of really cherished what they had, used what they had more, so that you could sort of not buy less, but sort of just make things in a more mindful way, use things in a more mindful way, use useful life extension services like all the amazing solutions that are in the room. And then if we sort of change that aspect of things, sort of front end things, then maybe we'll have time and money to sort of allow these innovations like textile to textile to develop.
I think the answer has to be pleasantly surprise them that actually we're doing it anyway. Yeah, I think that's the answer. I think from my point of view, it's my CEO's sitting in. She's probably going, "Oh, what the hell," basically. But actually, we're doing it. We've got a plan, and actually, I think that's the other point I would make is that actually, all the CMA stuff and all the rest of it. Of course, I don't want to get caught out and all the rest of it. I would like the customer to know what we're doing, but at the same time, actually, we have science-based targets that were approved in or verified, whatever the word is, in February, and from that perspective, it has to make business sense, and therefore, if I can align business sense, or we can align business sense with doing the right thing, and the customer getting some benefit from that, then that has to be the answer, I think.
Helen.
Oh, okay. I think from my perspective, which I guess is like slightly more unusual to everybody else's point of view, but I think as a small brand that is very well known for our kind of sustainable initiatives, I think one of the biggest changes is our brand partners. I'm very fortunate to work with loads of amazing global brand partners, and I think there's incredible designers in the room that also work with global brand partners, and I think a lot of us can sometimes get pigeonholed into a tick box of a kind of front-facing sustainable initiative. And I think what I would ask is that any of those brand partners that do want to collaborate with the incredible, whether it's textiles designers, whether it's artists, you know, that are doing interesting things, to just dig a little bit deeper than just the front-facing kind of customer-facing experience. How can our expertise and what we're doing within the business actually help your broader business model, and how can we kind of create a more global change and help you to create a more global change in the business rather than just show face, I guess. So that would be my answer.
Okay, thank you. And finally, Annabelle, as someone who's actually doing it, what do you think would be the biggest driver to producing more textile, fibre to fibre textile recycling?
Oh, I'm going to say this very I'm not saying this because it's my dad, but watching him build machines and then watching, you know, the whole process of the developing of the yarn spinning from the recycled fiber, and then to have that yarn have to be modified for weaving and knitting, and being a part of that whole process has already been a driver for me. So I, you know, just to clarify, we have the machine, but I'm also here to be able to like tell that story to the brands, because like Philippa said, there's, you know, there's too many middlemen, there's too much noise, and that's really why I came into the industry, and I didn't want to do it. I studied art history. I was like, I'm going to the art world. Goodbye. And my dad really like asked me to join because he was like, okay, I'm a machine engineer. Nobody's going to listen to me, but someone will listen to our story. And I think seeing that whole process of the behind the scenes has really pushed me to really, you know, drive the use of recycled fiber. And it's a slow process. It hasn't been exponential growth, and we haven't taken in all these investors. We don't have investors. We don't choose to do that. We've just scaled with the focus on the fiber that is out there. And yeah, I'm happy to have people join the journey with us. And
Brilliant, thank you. I'm getting evil eyes. The time for the panel discussion is up, so thank you very much indeed, panelists. That was fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's now over to everyone here. What we're going to do is we're going to break out into 5 sessions, and I know the acoustics in this room are a bit challenging, so maybe they could be quite closely knit session breakouts. So, sorry, I'm just going to pull out the problem statement. So we have a problem statement, which I don't think is going to be on the screen. So I'm going to remind you, I'm going to tell you what that is, but the scribes or the people taking notes from the Deloitte team will know what it is, so you can refer to it. So there is a lack of comprehensive collection, sorting, processing and recycling infrastructure to drive efficient textile recycling system. Thus, the challenge lies in developing a viable business model that addresses these barriers, demonstrating the economic feasibility, scalability and societal benefits of textile recycling initiative to stakeholders across the supply chain in order to drive investment. So the question is, what is the business commitment needed to enable a viable business case for recycled content? And I think what we're talking about here is specifically textile to textile. So we will have about 15 minutes, and can you choose one person to come and give your kind of key takeaways at the end? Thank you. Okay, is it possible to have one person from group 2, 3, 4, 5, and maybe one? Yeah, so it'll be great if you just give us a short summary of your discussion.
We briefly spoke about the difficulty of access to recycled materials, the challenges that we're encountering, difference between scale and how much might be available versus what's practical to put in today, the importance of shared education. I think that was the summary. It was a really rich discussion and really nice to unpack.
Great, thank you. Would someone from the second group, so the middle couch, perhaps come and give their summary?
We had, first of all, we didn't know, at least didn't know if we were answering the question, so we went on many different topics. I think one of the first things we identified or came out through the conversations is that this looks very different when we talk about fast fashion versus luxury, and the challenges are very different, and the opportunities are, so that needs to be taken into account. We looked at, many different areas. I think for us, obviously, we had designers, and we had, for example, there was the mention of Coach. When you look at, for example, luxury, we were saying there can be a trade-off, as was previously mentioned, between quality. So then the discussion was, is there ways to bring in these materials, for example, lining, where it's going to be less of an issue when we think about stuff to do with quality. Am I missing anything on our side? I think that was mainly it, no? Okay, sorry. So when the other thing we were looking at is when a brand commits to this, it needs to be a real commitment. brands need to move past this pilot phase. So there's a lot of brands that do the marketing of, we're going to do a pilot release, and we really need brands to make commitments to move past pilots, whether that's like a 3 or 5 year purchase commitment and real purchase commitments from companies, and to look at increasing the percentage of their portfolio that comes from these materials. So not just increasing the amount of the material, but actually making a commitment to say, okay, X% of our portfolio will come from recycled materials or next generation materials. So yeah, I think that was it. Yeah.
Anyone from the rear couch over there?
She's one of mine, so this better be good.
We echo quite a lot of the other things that were said. Some setting targets is really important. Committing to fibre tonnages as a brand. I think the point that you just made could be really important, and kind of a change of our system. And then the other key point, I think, was looking past the legal points. So if you have a contract, so wait, I'm trying to say this, it wasn't my point, but so if you're purchasing post-consumer recycled products, understanding that actually the quality or the consistency might be different, and how do you kind of build that into your contracts so that you're not penalising the startups who are providing that recycled contact. Did I explain that very well?
Yeah, I think you did.
So those were our key points.
Thank you. And then perhaps this sofa over in my far left.
Hello, everybody. We didn't echo the points of the other groups because we were the rebellious couch over there, where I suggested that we had been asked the wrong question, because if we're only talking about how we increase recycled fibre content without talking about volume and growth, and the fact that the growth of volume is inherently unsustainable, then we will be continuing to rearrange the deck chairs on the Titanic, as we have been doing at these events for the past 20 years. And I find it quite staggering that we're still doing that. So we had a great conversation about the complexities of growth and degrowth, and addressing volume. And even if we're making slightly better, more recycled things, but we continue to produce more and more and more of them, that can never be sustainable. And we talked about the need for a just transition on the impacts of garment workers who would be impacted if we do manage to reduce our production.
So we're the last group over here in the front. So we are a combination of fashion designers, academics from CSM, lovely representative from the Embassy of the Netherlands, and 2 innovators from the other side of the room. We initially first discussed that the business case was hard to validate from the academic side because it's so localized. And with that, there's very hard, it's increasingly difficult if it continues to be localized with the seasonality of fashion to then centralize it. And with that in mind, on the innovator side, presenting information, we thought of Germany from an infrastructure perspective, where the localized behavior of, for example, German citizens to deposit their own plastic bottles and then are actually compensated for that action feeds into a larger infrastructure which is in the interest of the German government to grow with Industry 4.0. And fashion and textile recycle waste is just a symptom of maybe the UK's lack of uptake of Industry 4.0 centralisation habits. So maybe it's not a business case, it's actually a government infrastructure case, which is way easier to present when pushing for legislation. So that's what we thought. And Genevieve, our scribe, was great.
Great, thank you. Well, I think that almost brings us to the end. Just wanted to throw it back to the panellists and moderators to see if there are any closing comments following that discussion.
I mean, what I would like to say is that actually, since getting involved with CFIN, actually everything that you have just tabled there constitutes part of that programme, including, I really like the way that the guy from Levi's put it this morning. So disruptors, it's good to get your point on the table. I think the guy from Levi's this morning said, you know, I'll have the conversation about how we do all the right things. Clearly, I work for a fashion business in the UK. We employ a lot of people as well. And so from that perspective, I'd rather take H&M's market share. You can judge me for that or not, basically, but let's keep it in the UK. But as far as efficiency, so the way in which we're actually, you know, planning production, to actually tighten the models, use the technology, reduce the amount of waste that's coming out. That in itself, you know, I don't know a merchandiser in any business that wants to be left with stock at the end of the season. So finding the magic wands to be able to do that, every business is all over that at the moment. So you're right to raise the point. We've got to find the mechanisms by which we can actually achieve that and still run commercial businesses.
Yeah, I was going to just add also, like, I love the rebellious opinions as well, but I mean, I'm half Thai, and I think I speak for also a lot of, you know, the global population who are not in a privileged position where we can stand here and say, let's reduce and buy less. And I mean, even from us, recycling is a very privileged standpoint to be able to have these technologies and create these fabrics. They're not more expensive, they're on the same level as organic cotton, but there's still a big portion of the population that relies on cheap clothing, and that's their lifestyle, and it's a trickle-down effect, of course. But I think, you know, when we are quick to criticize growth and all of that, there's a whole other world, you know, that we're not taking into consideration, and that's a little bit why we built, or my father decided to build this machine, is to like solve that problem. At least in the best way that he can. I mean, he's not going to solve the entire problem for sure, but it's just to keep an account that, you know, there's a lot of people on this planet who don't get the privilege of sitting here and discussing these ideas together. So yeah, we also have to consider that.
Can I also just quickly add, whilst there's really cool innovations on the horizon, we should also look at what's been working historically, and I forgot to say this earlier, but like in Prato in Italy, they've been recycling wool successfully for like 200 years. So if we can sort of learn from those enclaves and elevate them and emulate them, then hopefully we'll have a bit of a framework to follow, which we can use in tandem with the cool innovations.
Recycling wool was invented in Batley in West Yorkshire in 1813. And that's, you know, that's a really important point to make, is that we need our UK lens on a lot of this. Yes, it's a global industry, but we need a UK lens on this. The fact that Prato and the Italians are claiming they invented recycled wool, but in actual fact it happened in the UK, is just symptomatic of
Well,
that.
a lot
really
of the
annoying,
textile industry comes from here, right? I mean, it's all based out of the UK essentially. So
Shoddy manufacturing, for those that you don't know. Shoddy is the term for recycling wool.
Yeah.
So when you talk about a shoddy product, you're actually talking about a recycled product. Just to wrap up, if I may, sorry, unless any of the other panellists have got anything to say. I think one of the key things that came out of this, and it actually came out of from the Levi's talk this morning, and you mentioned it as well, is make it normal. Let's stop talking about it, let's do it, and let's make it normal. And I think that's the key to all of it.
Great. So thank you, everyone. I think that's it.
Thank you.